Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing women's unique challenges in the tech industry. I'm your host, Limor Bergman-Gross, and today I have a pleasure interviewing Ali Wilson. Ali Wilson is a seasoned executive coach who specialized in working with hidden leaders. Who are hidden leaders? Those are people who are capable, so much more, but often stay under the radar. Can personally very much relate with that myself. And in this episode, we're going to talk about Ali's journey, how she found her calling as a coach, and most importantly, about what it means to be a hidden leader. If you're someone who quietly gets things done but doesn't get recognized, maybe this is the right episode for you. If you're struggling to find your voice in a loud and busy environment, Ali has some fantastic advice for how you can start getting recognized, noticed, and getting the promotion you deserve. And we're going to discuss practical steps, how you can take to make yourself more visible, communicate your value, and create the career growth you've been aiming for. So this episode is packed with valuable insights, and let's dive right in. Hi Ali, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Super excited to have this conversation today with you. But before we get into it, why don't you kind of share with our audience what led you to become a coach?
Sure. So I was always interested in personal development and people development, and I didn't know much about coaching. But the thing that sticks in my mind where I made the decision that was what I was going to do was when a colleague of mine, I was working with him. We were in a very stressful situation. He was very busy. He was kind of very scattered. He was quite difficult to work with. And over the period of about 3 months, he just changed beyond all recognition. He kind of slowed down. He became more centered. He became much more considered in how he was working with us, and our results just transformed. I say now, when I think back on it, I feel like he got taller. He changed so much. And we never talked about it, but I kind of thought, I think he must have a coach or something because he's changed so much. And I found out a few months later that actually he had worked with a coach. And in that moment, I just thought, whatever has happened, I want to learn to do it because that looks like magic.
That's magic. That's what we do. We help people be taller. I'm just joking.
Yes, exactly.
We help people be taller in their mindset.
Yes, 100%.
Let's do that. Let's say that.
100%.
Yeah. And we are going to dive right into hidden leaders, which is your passion and your focus area. But before we do that, can you explain what you mean by that?
Yes, I will. I thought hard about this phrase and choosing the phrase hidden leaders. But what I was aware of was through my career, because I had quite a long career in corporate roles before I became a coach. And I'd always been very interested in managing teams and developing people. And I was kind of subconsciously aware of this phenomenon that I came across everywhere I worked, where there would be people that were really capable, really important to the organization, who were stuck in roles below the level of their capability and below the level of their ambition. I felt I'd experienced it myself, but as I noticed this more, I became very curious about it because what I was seeing was people who were exhibiting all the traits of great leadership actually not being in a position where they could really utilize that for the benefit of the organization. And I became, quite curious about that. And the term I've used to describe it is hidden leaders.
Yeah. Wonderful. And why do you think hidden leaders are often overlooked? Especially when you think about promotion.
Yes, 100%. Well, and one of the key things about it is, I don't think it's coincidence. I actually think the traits that these people should have are the reason that they're hidden. And so if I talk a little bit about what those traits are, they tend to be people that have very high emotional intelligence. So they're very aware of other people around them, and they're very curious about other people's perspective. So they're kind of constantly learning, and they have the humility to listen when someone's got a difference of opinion and to kind of really consider that and try and understand where it's coming from. So I think as a result of that, they tend to build up a much more nuanced picture of reality and a much kind of deeper understanding of what's happening within the systems that they're working, which can cause them to see things differently. So you've got this combination of people that have high humility, they're very interested in other people, they respect other people enormously, they have, in most cases, a kind of deeper understanding of the complexity that they're dealing with. They also much more concerned with the good of the group and what they're there to achieve as a whole, rather than their own individual progression. So they're kind of doing all of the things that need to be done to kind of get to a good solution. But because of that, they tend to be the last people to say, hang on a minute, you're wrong, you're missing something. They're much more likely to be questioning what they are missing and what information they don't, when something doesn't make sense, rather than recognizing that they're actually seeing something that other people aren't seeing because they're very talented. So you get to this point where people are feeling like, well, when I'm more senior, this will make sense. When I'm in a more senior role, I will be able to see something different that I'm missing now. And actually what's happening, of course, in reality is that's not the case at all. They're already seeing the things that the people more senior than them are missing. So I think that it's that combination of seeing things differently, recognizing that they're seeing things differently, but not necessarily having the confidence to see that's because they're talented. So they tend not to speak up and become overlooked.
Interesting. And I think that all the traits you're mentioning are very much women traits. I mean, I'm
Yep.
not saying that only women are like that, but many women are like that. How do you
Yes.
see that in your practice?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I like to say that not all hidden leaders are women and not all women are hidden leaders. But if we were looking at a Venn diagram, there would be a big overlap. You know, on the distribution of traits that are typically associated with more male styles versus more female styles, it definitely is shifted in that direction. And there's some really interesting research that I've come across, actually. So since I started thinking about hidden leaders, I kind of noticed this thing I was observing and then started questioning myself in true hidden leader style, thinking, well, surely if this was the case, other people would be talking about it. And actually, not many people are, but there are some people who have done research in this area. And there's one person in particular, Dr. Thomas Chamorro Premusic, who he wrote a book called, I think it's called Incompetent Men. Why do so many incompetent men become leaders? Because he had done some research and kind of looked at this. And what he said when he the result of all his research was, if we were actually promoting on capability rather than on projected confidence, not only would there be more female leaders, there would be more female leaders than male leaders, because typically the traits associated with successful leadership do tend to be the traits that are typically shown more predominantly by women. So yes, it's like a double problem for women.
Definitely. And I think you mentioned him also in our pre-call, and I looked, he has a pretty good TED Talk. So I think it will be worthwhile sharing that, something about, like why so many incompetent leaders
men become leaders. Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting. I mean, what he showed from the research he did across, they were looking at thousands of organizations. He found that not only were the traits that would get you promoted not the same as the traits that would make you a successful leader, they were actually inversely correlated. So meaning that if you had the traits that were going to make you a good leader, you were less likely to get promoted. And it's because unfortunately, in many of the cultures in which we work, confidence and kind of narcissistic traits are mistaken for good leadership, and they're not.
Yeah, so I think you refer me to why do so many mediocre men rise to the top? That was like an article, I think, and I
Yeah.
watched YouTube, so we'll definitely reference that. But then going back to women, and we know that, and I know it on myself, right? We tend to judge ourselves all the time and think, I don't know yet enough. I'm not there, right? As you said, like, oh, when I'll get there, I can share. But actually feeling like, actually, what you know now is good enough. Like, you don't have to wait until, because it's endless, right? We constantly learn and grow all the time. We
Yeah.
cannot wait until the time that we know everything, because that time will never.
Yes, exactly. There's a great quote about human beings are like beautiful pieces of art that mistakenly think will be finished one day, and we never will.
Yeah. So what women or people that recognize themselves as hidden leaders, having all the traits you mentioned, what can they do so they can be more seen and
Sure.
negotiate their promotions?
Yes, exactly. Well, I think actually just having that shift in perspective. So for me, when I had that thought, it wasn't even a realization. It was just the kind of like an inkling of an idea that, hang on, what if I'm seeing this differently because I'm good at what I do, not because I'm deficient in some way? For me, that started to change everything. And I would encourage anyone that's listening that's thinking, oh gosh, like I recognize this description of a hidden leader, it might be me. I would really encourage you to just spend a bit of time reflecting on that. What if you knew that the reason you're seeing things differently is because you're good at what you do? What would that change? How would you show up differently? Because sometimes it can be just quite a subtle shift in ourselves that creates a change in when we're prepared to speak up and how we're prepared to share. I also think there's something about being curious. So being like open-minded to what's going on and being curious to the idea that maybe there's something in the system in which you're operating that is causing you to feel like this, rather than it being something that you're missing within you. The reason I think being curious is so helpful is, first of all, it can make it easier to disagree with people, because someone once said to me, why you're saying what you're saying is far more important than the actual words you use. Like, if your intention is to better understand, that comes across even if the words are a bit clumsy. And it's so much easier to kind of question things when you're coming at it from that perspective of, that's really interesting because I see it differently. Help me understand what you're seeing that I'm not. So that can lead to some really good conversations, and it can kind of make it easier for people to speak up. The other thing that happens, I've noticed when I've worked with clients, that when we focus on being curious rather than judgmental, a lot of the inner judgment of ourselves stops as well. We can stop labeling ourselves as good or bad and we can just be much more curious about what's happening for me in this moment. What response am I getting when I show up and ask these questions? And those kind of two things together, allowing yourself to entertain the idea that maybe you're good at what you do and that you're going to show up with curiosity, can just make a huge shift in how you're engaging with your colleagues and people who are more senior than you, and the kind of visibility of the work that you're doing. And I have got one other recommendation as well. I think it's vitally important to find a community of people that see the same things you do, that see brilliance in what you're doing and saying. And I think it's really, so if you can seek out a mentor or someone in your organization that you resonate, that kind of their approach resonates with you and you admire the way they're working, that can make a massive difference. Sometimes it's not possible. People like that aren't there. In that case, seek out mentors outside, even things like listening to podcasts like your podcast, or just surrounding yourself with a community of voices and opinions and ideas where you can hear the things that you think about, and the kind of skills that you have reflected back to you can help you begin to appreciate all of the strengths that you have. So I do think community is critical.
I completely agree. And many companies, and I do, work with a lot of women ERGs. Maybe many companies are now have those employee resource groups internally, and you can find if your company have resource group, one that you can relate to or seek outside external communities. Again, I'm talking here about women. So look for women networks that are relevant to you and what you do, so you can kind of hang out with more people like you. So you feel like I'm not the only person thinking like that. I'm not crazy.
I'm not crazy. I'm seeing something other people in my company aren't seeing, and it's important and it matters. And one of the things I've seen when those networks form is where women in particular can find it difficult to recognize the kind of brilliance in themselves. They see it in other people around them so easily. And so when you have that network around you and you can kind of identify with that group, it can just boost your confidence enormously.
Absolutely. And I always ask women, especially women, get external feedback as much as possible from people that you feel like are going to give you good feedback, good constructive feedback, detailed enough, and open up yourself to hearing that and acknowledging things about yourself that maybe you haven't thought about, because we tend to be so self-critical. As you said, those hidden leaders, I mean, there is a certain level of being self-critical and not realizing actually that the different perspective we bring and who we are, it's a strength to bring something different. And sometimes we need external validation to that, as someone else is saying that. What do you think?
100%. I totally agree. And one of the things I struggled with earlier in my career was actually just poor quality feedback. I would often, I kind of performed well. I was a good performer. I was good at my job, but I was crippled with insecurity, and I always felt that I wasn't doing enough. And what I would find at appraisals is I was always told things like, yes, this is very good, but you're not ready for promotion. And I didn't know what that meant, but I would just say, okay, go away. Maybe I'll try again next year. And that's something that I notice with hidden leaders as well. They're often given that feedback, you're not ready. For me, that's a flag that there's something in the culture that you're battling with there, because what does that mean? What will it look like when I am ready? How will you know that I'm ready? What is it you need to see from me? So I think having also the confidence to really make sure that the feedback you're getting is helpful and that you can go away from it thinking, okay, so I'm clear about what I'm going to work on to actually increase my impact.
Wow. I resonate so much with what you're saying. And, I had a manager that always told me, Limor, you're doing great. And I was always upset. So I was like, what does it even mean? Like, what do you mean I'm doing great? It doesn't help me because I don't know what it means. Can you share? Like, what great? What are the specific things I'm doing you think are great? So don't be afraid to challenge your manager and asking follow-up questions. Or if you're saying, well, but you're not ready. Okay, what do you mean I'm not ready? What does it take to be ready? What does ready look like? What are the things you need to see or that I need to do so I am ready?
Yeah. And I wonder, I mean, I've never asked the question, but I wonder how many men get that feedback, because I suspect fewer men hear that than women.
Probably fewer, because they will challenge. They will not accept that. I think that what happens, and maybe it's unconscious, but saying something like that to a woman, the person saying that knows that probably she will not challenge. So it's easier just to say, okay, you're not ready. And you're not ready can be maybe she's not ready, or it could be, I don't have the budget to promote you right now. It could be multiple things, by the way. And just easy to say you're not ready. And then we just swallow it and say, okay, I'm not ready. But we don't know what that means.
Yes, exactly. And that's an example of one of those things that we tell ourselves. Well, when I'm more senior, I will understand absolutely what they were saying. And I've got news. I made it to the C-suite and looked down. It's no different. The view from up there is exactly the same. So if it doesn't make sense where you're sitting, it doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
That's the advice I would say.
And as someone who's been in the C-suite, what recommendations would you give to leaders, both men and women, that are in the C-suite or in leadership impacting roles, what do they need to do to help those hidden leaders, to identify them and to help them and support them?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things is to be really clear when you're both recruiting and making promotion decisions about how you are measuring the impact of that person and the role, and being very clear that you are making decisions based on results and ability to deliver results and not style, that you're not overemphasizing the impact of style. Because so an example I give of this is one of the things that I used to find very frustrating when we were in talent reviews or discussing people. Someone said something like, yeah, she's good, but she's quiet in meetings. And my pushback on that would be, well, so what? Because she's got nothing to say. If you can give me an example of where she hasn't spoken up and she had information that would have been valuable to the group, then let's talk about it. But if you're saying her style or her preference is to kind of take the information and consider it internally before she makes a contribution, rather than doing her thinking out loud, which is like a more typical extrovert trait, so long as we get to the right the style and the way someone chooses to do it, that's not appropriate feedback. That's not, let's talk about the results and the impact. So I think that's the thing I always challenge the teams that I work with to really think about, like, how are you objectively measuring the impact that this person is having and the traits that they need to be able to do that in their role. The second thing is to pay close attention to the people that in your talent management review you have classed as solid performers. Because I'm not saying all of your solid performers are hidden leaders, but that's likely where they'll be if you've got them in your team. And you need to get really curious, like talk to their peers. 360 feedback, as you said, is so valuable. Who's the person that the team are going to when they're unsure about things or they need a deeper level of understanding? Who's the person that's seen as the glue that's holding everything together, that's kind of connecting everything and keeping the kind of wheels on the truck? Because those are the people that are likely your hidden leaders.
Yeah, those are really good tips. I want to mention something about the quiet people, because I have been mostly quiet, to be honest. It's hard for me to step into a conversation, especially when it's very loud and passionate conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times people are quiet, not because they want to be quiet. Sometimes they don't have anything to say, so they're just quiet. But sometimes you just cannot find a way to insert yourself to a conversation without maybe speaking over someone else, because the discussion, again, can be heated, or maybe people are not really paying attention to building an inclusive discussion that they give the space. And this is another thing that I would say, if you as a leader say, oh, this person is very quiet, they really need to speak up so I can promote. Ask yourself, why are they quiet? And what am I doing as a leader to give the space for that person to speak up, to feel more comfortable speaking up, more confident speaking up, to feel like it's actually okay to say something in that environment?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And one thing, so I was given a fantastic piece of advice by a lady who had been very senior. And so when I first moved into my more senior role, again, I was the only woman in the room. I found board meetings very challenging. Not because I couldn't speak up, but because I felt like I wasn't heard when I spoke up. That the conversation would just carry on. And this lady, she said something which really helped me. She said, you can look at this through the frame of, poor me, I'm the only woman and no one's listening to me. I'm the victim in this. Or she said, you can see that you actually have a unique power in that situation, because all the men around that table are part of this kind of unspoken rule of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. There's a hierarchy. They're very clear about their place in order to belong. There's a very clear structure of who like unspoken rules about who can speak and who can't, and they're all adhering to it. She said to me, "You're not part of that. You're never going to be part of that. So you have nothing to lose." And actually, her point was that if you're sitting in that kind of situation, you can see something. The people, like the elephant that no one is talking about, you're actually uniquely positioned to bring that to the conversation. And I totally get your point about how hard it is to cut in and to find a way. But if you can find a way to do that, just saying something like, "Oh, it's interesting because I see it differently," or "I'm noticing something that we haven't mentioned yet. What about?" And her point was that if what you're saying is valid, the most senior person in the room will pay attention. And for me, it kind of is one of those things that was just a reframe. It didn't change anything physically in the situation, but it just gave me such a feeling of strength to speak up that it was like, yes, actually, I have some privilege that the others don't have, which really helped.
Yeah, and I feel like today, when a lot of meetings are done virtually, if you really have a good culture of having discussions and having maybe people raise hand in Zoom, at least for me as an introvert, as someone is hard for kind of, as I said, to speak up in a meeting, it really helps. But you need to build that good culture of, okay, everyone can speak up and we allow everyone to share their thoughts. And someone has to kind of manage that, kind of lead the conversation and allow people to speak up equally.
Yeah, and likewise, recognizing that if you're in a situation that you don't have that, talking to your manager or whoever's facilitating the meeting offline, if that's more comfortable, and explaining, asking for what you need, saying what would make it easier for you to contribute is really a valid and important thing to do. You know, your organization is paying for you to be there because of the things you have to contribute. So it's totally for you to request what you need to be able to do that comfortably.
Yeah, absolutely. And another topic I want to touch on is, let's say I'm a hidden leader and I'm usually pretty quiet, humble, and I'm not recognized, right? I mean, I'm a solid performer, but not more than that, and I'm not set up for promotion. What can I do so I get recognition for what I do and I'm being considered for a promotion?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is having that shift inside to kind of acknowledge that's what you want, and that recognition it's what you deserve as well, that actually you are contributing in a way the promotion makes sense because that will allow you to kind of increase your impact even further. And then having the conversation with your manager, being able to kind of prepare for that so that you, within you, are very confident and comfortable with saying, "I would like to move to a more senior level. These are the things I'm contributing. This is what I think I can bring. And this is what I would like to do." So I think kind of finding the confidence to have that direct conversation. Also recognizing it's very difficult because I think typically women tend to get given developmental feedback that is trying to encourage them to behave more like a narcissistic person. Believe in yourself, don't care what anyone else says, just say it anyway. And obviously that just doesn't feel authentic. So I think it's about finding the ways to kind of make the points, being very clear, and actually finding that courage within to point out the ways in which you're contributing and you can make a bigger impact. We've talked already about finding mentors and finding a community and people to surround yourself with who will help you grow that confidence, finding ways to create the evidence that you need yourself to believe in yourself, being very clear about the goals and the growth targets you're giving yourself, investing in your own growth and development, and really owning your ambition and acknowledging that if you're in an environment where you're not going to be given recognition for that, you need to look at whether you need to move rooms, whether you need to move to a different place and find an environment where you really can shine as the person that you, with all of your strengths coming out into the light.
Wonderful. And before we wrap up for today, Ali, any last piece of advice you would like to give our listeners?
So it's not really any advice specifically, but just the key thing I would like people to take away is just allow yourself to be open to the possibility that perhaps you're actually really, really good, that you're actually brilliant at what you do, and you're naturally a gifted leader. If you find yourself going around in circles, asking yourself, what am I missing? What more do I need to do? I'm reading all the books and everything they're saying makes sense to me. It's more than likely a sign that you have a kind of natural inclination to a leadership style which is incredibly effective. So maybe ask yourself the question, what would I do differently if I knew I was great at this already?
Thank you so much, Ali. And where can people find out about your work with hidden leaders?
Fantastic. So my website is hidden-leader.com, and there's more information on there. There's articles and things. So yeah, you can find out much more on my website.
Definitely, and I'll put a link to your website on the show notes. Thank you so much, Ali, for being here today. It's been a pleasure having you today.
Thank you, Lima. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode with Ali. I hope you enjoyed it. And before you go, I want to give you a heads up about what's coming up next week. Next week episode, I'm speaking with Victoria Mensch. She's a psychologist that turned into a tech executive, and we're going to talk about burnout. So if you ever felt like you're overwhelmed, either stuck in your career or just questioning your choices, I think that Victoria's story will really speak to you, because she's been there. She's been burned out. She has been pivoting careers, and she found her way back to fulfillment. And in the episode, she shared how she recognized burnout before it consumed you, and some practical steps you can take to regain control of your energy, career, and happiness. So if you feel like you may be on a verge of burnout, I think that this episode is definitely for you and you don't want to miss it. And as always, feel free to comment on this episode, provide your feedback on what you like and what you would like to hear, and subscribe to never miss another episode. Thank you so much for listening. This is Limor, and I'll see you next week. Have a wonderful day.